Good afternoon or good morning or no one cares. So today we're going to have a look at a comprehension exercise in the book. I know we don't do this very often, probably not often enough really, but we're going to do one. Now we're doing reports and yeah, the book really sucks. It's terrible, there's no real anything in it. I mean, reports is just a reuse of explanations. They haven't even bothered to come up with something between the two to make it more fun. They've just gone straight in and just said, no, this is the cheapest, easiest way to make the book. Let's just do it. So we're going to have a look at page 216 onwards. For those of you that have got the book, for those of you that haven't got the book, have a look at Google Classroom. I've put photographs of the text in there. So we're going to look at an information report about the Yeti, monsters of the mountains. Now this is all about Bigfoots and skunk apes, that kind of thing, like giant proto-hominids, so hairy humanoid creatures that some people believe are all around the world. We get a lot of sightings in America, where people really believe that Bigfoot is a thing. The Yeti is in parts of Asia, where it's pretty much the same thing, but in snowy landscapes. And there's lots of different stories that contradict each other. There has never been any absolute evidence. We've found large footprints, we've found pieces of hair. DNA comes back that it could be a proto-human, so it could be part human, part something else, but the DNA tests weren't considered of the highest scientific standard, so they could easily have been corrupted. So we've ended up with a net zero. Zero evidence of any of the existence of these creatures. All we've got is hundreds, if not thousands, of eyewitness sightings. So a lot of people believe this is true. They swear that they've seen them. But it's all very difficult to say because there's a lot of hoaxes and there's a lot of crazy people out there. They're often seen in black bear country, so they could easily be mistaken for something else because bears often walk upright if they're scavenging in trees. So it's very difficult to know if this is just make-believe or not. Human brain is a funny thing. So let's have a look at the text, page 216. Wild people. Are they part of our human imagination or a reminder of times when our ancestors too roamed the forests naked? For most people, the mention of wild people brings to mind hairy creatures that walked upright and lived in the wilderness. So in other words, Turkey today. Wild people exist in most cultures. In Europe, they appear hairy and leaf-covered in carvings on medieval churches. In the 20th century, much of the earth has been explored, but there are still pockets of rarely visited wilderness and a belief in wild people that persists to this day. In the mountainous Asian country of Nepal, between India and Tibet, there is an enduring tradition of strange creatures called the Yeti, also known as the abominable snowman. Most of the stories about the Yeti are told by local people, the Sherpas. The Yeti has been described differently by the various people who claim to have seen it, but most agree that it's a hairy creature, rather ape-like, with hair ranging in colour from grey to reddish brown. Yeti authorities also believe that there are 3 different types of such creature, each a different size. The first type, called a thelma, is said to be small, about the size of a 15-year-old boy. The second type, the mitae, is supposedly the size of an average human adult, while the third, called the dezouter, is believed to grow up to 2.5 meters in height. Sightings have been recorded for centuries, and there are even pictures of the Yeti in early books from Nepal. The Sherpas, who have lived in the region for centuries, are firmly convinced that the Yeti exists. In fact, as far as they're concerned, the Yeti is just part of the local wildlife, with nothing special about them. It is not only the locals who claim to have seen them. In 1832, a British man, B.H. Hodson, saw and described a creature that walked upright, was covered in dark hair and had no tail, while in 1948, a Norwegian called Jan Frostis, who was prospecting for uranium, actually claimed to have been attacked by one near Zemu Gap in Sikkim, a Himalayan state. China also has a long-standing history of recorded Yeti sightings. 2,000 years ago, the Chinese poet Qi Huan wrote of mountainous ogres, while in the Tang dynasty, AD 618 to 907, the historian Li Yanshu described a band of hairy men living in an area called Jiangling. Sounds like the noise keys make on the end of your keyring. Sightings have been recorded in the 20th century. In the 1940s, a Chinese biologist saw a female wild man which had been shot. The biologist thought that this creature looked like the Peking man, the Chinese version of Homo erectus, or upright man. That's a proto-hominid, an early humanoid. Sir Edmund Hillary became world famous in 1953 when he and his Sherpa guide, Tenzing Norgay, became the first people to climb to the top of Mount Everest, the world's highest mountain. Hillary was firmly convinced that the Yeti existed. He claimed to have seen its footprints in the snow during a December 1951 ascent with British mountaineer Eric Shipton. Shipton is the first person ever to have taken a photo of Yeti footprints. The footprints he photographed had partly melted into oval shapes. But where snow covered the ice was thin, the tracks were much clearer. He described them as having three-toed with a broad thumb to one side. In a report in the Times, Shipton also said that he'd seen similar footprints before in various parts of the Himalayas and in the Karakoram, but these were the best preserved. Later, during the 1953 ascent, Hillary again found tracks he thought belonged to the Yeti. He returned to Nepal in 1960, hoping to photograph one of the creatures. He went first to a village named Bedding, where he gathered stories about sightings, and went to a place called Kamjung, where a famous Buddhist monastery kept a Yeti scalp. Hillary was allowed to see the scalp, which he described as looking like a pointed cap of reddish hair, but he said there was no way of telling exactly what it was. Hillary managed to persuade the monks to lend it to him and then sent it to the laboratories of Chicago and Paris for analysis. The scientists, however, were not able to come to a definite conclusion. The Americans said it was the scalp of a wild goat, antelope, while the French thought it was from a bear. In any case, despite seeing the footprints, Hillary never did see a live Yeti or was able to prove that they exist. To this day, expeditions searching for the Yeti have never returned with substantiated sightings, proved, or even with the evidence of its existence. What is the Yeti, and why do we know so little about it? Prehistoric China was home to a type of ape called Gigantopithecus. Not so bad. According to one theory, the Yeti might be descended from this creature. Not much is known about Gigantopithecus, only a few teeth and jawbones have been found, but this has been enough for scientists to come up with some theories. Because of the size of the teeth, it is thought to have been as tall as 2.7 meters in height. The heavy coating of enamel on the teeth suggested it lived on food that needed grinding, seeds and roots. The teeth of modern apes only have a thin layer of enamel, and the front teeth are designed to shred, then chew their food. It's also possible that the animal was a bipod, a creature that walked on 2 feet, and that it left the forest to roam the savanna from China to the foothills of the Himalayas. It's possible that there could be an animal we know nothing about living high up in the mountains. There are many inaccessible places in the mountains where the creature could live without ever being found. Indeed, in places the vegetation is so thick that it is almost impossible to get through. Creatures that had lived in such a place for thousands of years would certainly know their way around and could hide quite easily. In addition, the valleys between the mountains would supply plenty of food. So why can the Yeti be seen in the mountains? It has been suggested that it travels between the valleys where there are only a few trails, and humans and animals alike have to use them. The Sherpas also believe that there is salt in a certain moss which grows on rocks in the snowfields that the Yeti favours. While a zoologist called Ivan Sanderson thinks that it might be after the vitamin E in some parts, in some of the lichens that grow at high altitudes. After all, he points out, some birds fly thousands of miles to breed on the edge of the polar snows when they melt in spring, looking for the plants and insects which provide the baby birds with vitamin E. So why should the Yeti be doing the same thing? So that's the story in the book of the Yeti, or the Abominable Snowman. As I say, no evidence, no proof, but no one's really taken it sort of scientifically seriously. It would be, in modern times, if we really wanted to find it, we could. No one's made any sort of serious attempt to do so. So make from that what you will. Now, if you look in Google Classroom, there's a series of questions from the books. I want you to answer those, and then we'll go through the answers in a minute.